This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics on the NBA. We are in full tilt NBA playoff action. It has not disappointed. I'm talking about NBA games on fleek. Teams are going at it, and already surprising playoff defeats and victories, man. Never look a dead horse in the mouth. I'm not sure who came up with that, but right about now, there are a few teams that wish that they would not look at a Pelican's mouth right now, because they are probably one of the most dangerous animals paired with an NBA team to date. But let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Tell me, man, have you been seeing any Pelicans roaming around down in the Florida area, or is it just straight flamingos and geese?
Geese. Don't know about that. We have our fair share of ugly ducks, so kind of walking around out here for sure. But definitely, if I saw a pelican right now, I think I'd definitely run the other way, fear the brow, and fear the pelicans, so to speak, as they.
I know there's a few 76ers roaming about there, but I don't know if they're a part of anything in the bird family. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Yeah, again, we got all the monsters. We got Trust the Process in the Miami area right now. Did their thing in the playoffs as well too, but. Lots of great fun action that took place in the NBA over the last week and a half or so NBA playoffs, man. And we're gonna get right to it, man. A lot of things to discuss, but one in particular that I think is gonna have our fans and listeners kind of scratching their heads, as if we scratching ours after Portland got bounced in that first round by the hands of Pelicans.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be our main topic of conversation in the breakdown. Again, we do our thing. It's the autopsy report, and right up on that list of the autopsy, the Portland Trailblazers. And I'm sure myself and Shaw, we have much to discuss when it comes to that basketball team, and definitely what we saw as it pertains to the NBA playoffs, the upset in many respects to the New Orleans Pelicans. So we'll definitely get into that. And then segment of the drop, hey, this is all about the NBA playoffs. I know everybody's fixated with a lot of the things that are happening right now, but if you haven't been paying attention, there's been a lot of good basketball being played. Maybe in some respects, the first round hasn't dictated a lot of those points, but I guarantee you, if you read between the wins and the losses, you'll see some really heavy-duty ball being played. So we'll get into that in our segment of the drop. So a lot of good stuff to talk about. This is NBA playoff-style baseline NBA podcast discussions that's going on right here. So you know where to get at us. Get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where we are. You know how we roll. So make sure that you download that platform. Throw on your headphones, kick back, allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. Time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warrenshaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. This week on the breakdown, autopsy report. It's about that time. Another one bites the dust. My man Sean and I get to dissect the demise of the Portland Trailblazers. And look, if you had asked me, Shaw, when we did our previews for the NBA playoffs, and we went into, the things that we felt were necessary for what the New Orleans Pelicans needed to do in order to win this series, we just thought that a better, well-coached team and a playoff-tested Damian Lillard, who's shown himself in the NBA playoffs, CJ McCollum, has shown himself in the NBA playoffs, that without Boogie Cousins, this Pelicans team might not have enough in the tank. But not only did they prove us wrong, but they also exposed a lot of things that I didn't think was possible to be exposed when you talk about the Portland Trailblazers, because we thought they took the next level doing what they did to get themselves at the point to be the 3 seed in the Western Conference. And that just totally blew everything up out of the water when you looked at how badly the Pelicans dismantled the Portland Trailblazers in this first round of the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, unfortunately for Portland, they got just obliterated and rocked out. I think we both had Portland winning this series, but in a long series. I had Portland winning it in 7. So see the Pelicans to come out on top is not so much a surprise, especially if you're picking a series to go 7 games. But to see the Pelicans come out in a series sweep and the way they dominated Portland for the better part of that series was very, I think, embarrassing for the Trailblazers, and where a lot of people, even some people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but some people were saying, oh, Portland's not as good as their regular season record shows. Well, then, Pelicans exposed that really and truly. Defensively, Anthony Davis and company were on another level. They got playoff Rondo, and really it comes down to Lillard and McCollum not being able to really sustain a level of intensity and play that was able to match New Orleans. And I think the biggest thing that you get from this series, more than anything else, and it's unfortunate to some degree, but Lillard himself, as a superstar player, as a guy who's going to be all NBA and all those things, he wasn't able to, and not to say because he didn't score a lot and didn't shoot the ball effectively, but he wasn't able to impact the game any other way. And a true superstar, elite level player finds a way to make sure his guys are seeing and feel him out there. So he needed to play better defense. He needed to get more assists and dribble and penetrate. All he tried to do was affect the game by scoring the basketball, and New Orleans locked that crap down.
Man, there's so many ways that we can go. There's so many directions that we can go with this. But I'm going to agree with you with reference to what Damian Lillard didn't do. But I'm also going one step further about this, Shaw. What really disturbs me about this Portland Trailblazers team is, yet again, we're somehow been fooled. I don't want to look at the fact that they were the 3 seed. Let's concede to the fact that the Portland Trailblazers is a good basketball team. There's no question about that. And it was basically a toss-up. They could have either been a top 4 team in the Western Conference, or they could have been a part of the bottom 4 teams in the Western Conference very easily. But I thought that Terry Stotts helped this team take themselves to the next level as far as stepping up and playing above and beyond themselves. And it's just weird to me that they put in all of this work, all of this effort. Okay, they didn't crack 50 wins this year, but they put in all this work and this effort just to step into the first round of the NBA playoffs and look like quintessentially worse than the Portland Trailblazers of teams 2-3 years ago when they were injury ridden, where they didn't have depth in their lineup. Like, they look like almost a shell. This was even pre CJ McCollum-ish. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just weird to me, Shaw, that you have this team that really played well in the second half of the season to put themselves in this position. And it would be one thing if, they were just bested by a really good basketball team. They were bested by a team that had a lot, really had nothing left to lose. Like, everyone didn't expect them to do what we said that they needed to do. And it was all there for Portland. And I really think that this team took a serious step back in how we look at them. It's almost as if we're saying, do we really buy into the Portland Trailblazers the next year that they go into the NBA playoffs with the roster that they may have constructed? Because ultimately, there are going to be pieces there that will not have what it takes in order to step up and make significant contributions, no matter who they play, come next year if they do make the playoffs.
Well, I want to go back to your original point, and this will be pseudo letting Portland off the hook per se. This wasn't a typical 6 seed that they played, and in the Western Conference, like you said, you could have been 3 or you could have been 8, by a matter of a game or two. I think in years past, typically a 3 seed probably has maybe a 5 to 7 game discrepancy in terms of the win column, maybe as much as 10 games in some cases as well too. Usually your 1, 2, and 3 seeds are like truly elite teams in the conference. And that just wasn't the case in the West this year. So there's not trying to take anything away from what New Orleans was able to accomplish in this, but you do have to look at Portland and say, listen, they weren't really as good as we thought or hoped they were going to be in this playoff series. Terry Stotts, great job in the regular season, getting this team as high as they did in the conference, but unable to make the adjustments and unable to even inspire some of his guys to match the intensity that New Orleans was able to display throughout the course of the series. And there is a lot of windfall that's going to come as a result of this. Listen, through the course of the regular season and even the last 2 years, there's been conversations about whether or not McCollum and Lillard should stay together as a duo, or should they one of them be traded. And obviously McCollum was a guy whose name has been floated in trade rumors as well. But now they're not getting Nurkic back, at least you don't think so, because they're going to be cap strapped. There's also the possibility of Terry Stotts being let go as a result of this, of not having playoff success. And if he's let go, he's going to be one of the hottest names on the coaching market for some of those lesser teams. But in Portland, has he outstayed his welcome as a result of not having enough playoff success? These are all the things that happen when you get swept. Now, if they lose in the first round and they lose more gracefully, maybe not all of these questions come about, but getting swept makes it that much worse for them. And it just have to say, okay, they can't continue on like this. So I'll ask this to you, very bluntly. Do you think a guy like CJ McCollum needs to get traded in order to change up this roster one way or another? Because from a cap standpoint, they can't attract a free agent. They have $112 million in salary next year committed already, and that's without having Nurkic or Ed Davis on their roster. They don't even have those guys locked up. $112 million. So do you feel like this team needs to go another direction by trading a guy like CJ McCollum, or would you trade Dame himself?
I can't say that this team needs to go in a different direction. Let's look at a few teams, Shaw, that is in some ways almost look to weather the storm, right? Let's look at the Washington Wizards. How many times have we had the conversation with Bradley Beal and John Wall about splitting those guys up? How many times have we had the conversation with the Toronto Raptors? Ironically, those are the two teams that are playing against each other in the first round of the playoffs this year, right? When we talk about DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. It's only been just a few years removed that these two guys combined to post the highest totals of a backcourt in NBA history against the Golden State Warriors, a team that went to the NBA Finals, right? So there is some good that does come from this backcourt combination. The problem that I really think that does happen is one of two things. And this is not against Terry Stotts, because I agree with you, Shaw. We wouldn't be giving the high praises of Terry Stotts if we didn't think that he was a great coach. But as long as he continues to be a head coach under this organization, I don't know if they're going to give him the necessary pieces that he needs to really build a team that's going to have sustainable success, regardless of whatever you do with CJ McCollum. You get what I'm saying? It's going to be one of two things. Either the ownership is going to have to figure out a way to smartly move monies around and give players that Terry Stotts can coach to a level that these guys can play at a high level consistently, or you're going to have to make some kind of play and move Terry Stotts. But if you give up CJ McCollum, you've already written Portland's demise, so to speak, and people's believability that they're always going to compromise the money. They're going to, not compromise the money, but they're always going to look at the money as to be one of the determining factor that's going to cut off something that could be a sustained level of success for years to come in Portland, which is hard pressed, because let's now keep in mind the Utah Jazz, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Minnesota Timberwolves, all of these teams, and the Denver Nuggets, all of these teams have pieces and components for the next 3 to 4 years that will always be put in the conversation of playing in the NBA playoffs. And if you're the Portland Trailblazers, can you ill afford having a Damian Lillard only and then nobody else? If you give up CJ McCollum, or you keep CJ McCollum and you give up Damian Lillard, that you don't have anything around your player to continue to compete in the NBA playoffs. That's going to be hard pressed, man. It's going to be hard pressed.
Well, this is a roster that has struggled all year with getting production at the three position, and Evan Turner and Mo Harkless, they were adequate. Combined, they averaged 17 and 8 combined in their roles in the playoffs, and Harkless only played 2 of the 4 games. But that's a position that I think they've been trying to fill, and that's why you heard them trying to go after Carmelo last summer and things of that nature. Aminu is a good starter in the league. He played really great in the series, as New Orleans decided to ignore him and they decided to try to let him beat them. And he did his best, but again, if Aminu is going to have to score 17, 18 points a game, you're probably not going to win if that's the case. I guess the other question boils down to is, what do they do with Nurkic? Now, they would have to clear a salary, presumably, to get Nurkic to be able to come back, and that's if they want to keep him. The other thing that they have going for them is that they have a dearth, if you will, of big men who they also need to develop. Guys like Caleb Swanigan, and then the guy that they played pretty well in his time out there, in Zach Collins. Those two guys can maybe spell Nurkic to some degree if you're going to try to let him walk. ideally, the best situation for them would be if they could try to get some sort of sign and trade for Nurkic, and try to get a small forward to come back in some sort of package for them. I just don't know, where they're going to be at, where Neil O'Shea stands with this roster, and especially when it comes to Nurkic. Even but Pat Connaughton, the sharpshooter, he's not even signed for next year. So it's very, very confusing to me to see what Portland is going to try to do and what they can do with this roster, and that's why it's easy to point. It's like, all right, well, they got to split the baby, so to speak, trade one of their big guys to try to get some either more draft picks to young guys or get talent that's better suited to kind of fill out the roster as a whole. But I'm stuck. You know what I mean? Trying to figure out where they're going to go and what they can actually do. Those options, none of them seem all that sexy to me, and it doesn't allow for a whole lot of cap flexibility in a Western Conference that's going to get tougher and tougher by each year.
Wasn't there a time, Shaw, that we talked about how great or important it was that you win the Northwest Division? I mean, this team did win the Northwest Division, right? If you can make comparisons to the other divisions in the NBA, and you can very easily say that this was one of the toughest divisions to play in this season. And yet we're already talking about, and it's not like we're saying that the Portland Trailblazers have won the Northwest Division multiple years, right? It's been a revolving door. Last year, I think it was the Utah Jazz. The year before that, it was the Oklahoma City Thunder. So my whole thing is that it's interesting, you could use this as a way to really prop up Terry Stotts as a head coach and say, look at what he was able to do. With the roster that he had, he was able to get this team to be the best team in the Northwest Division. And then you can say on the flip side of it, wow, there's no way that you can sustain being a number one team out of this division with this type of roster being constructed. Because outside of CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard, there's not a whole lot more that you can look. You may look at Zach Collins, but he is going to have to be a project, right? And there has to be some level of inclusion that CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard really have to start learning how to trust in their teammates, young and old. And you have to start saying to yourself, where does Zach Collins fit in that big picture if you choose to keep this backcourt combination? Because by all accounts, this could be one of the most lethal scoring combinations, but so much is left to be desired about their ability to make their other teammates better. And this, to me, I think was the biggest struggle that the Portland Trailblazers faced against the New Orleans Pelicans. Because ultimately, if these guys could not hit their shots, who were they going to lean on to help them maintain if the Pelicans were going to be this hot for 4 games in a playoff series? I mean, if nothing else, the Pelicans really exposed 2 things. The Portland Trailblazers are not a good team as far as taking out the opposition's best player. And in this case, we said that the best player in this series was going to be Anthony Davis. And if he stayed healthy and he started sunning the Portland Trailblazers, that this was going to be a long series. But then what was the other thing that I said, Shaw? I said my X factor was going to be Drew Holiday. It was either going to be Drew Holiday, who is a 5-tool player, but recognizes that he's at his best when he's only in his 3-tool mind, or he's trying to be, he's a 3-tool player trying to act like he's a 5-tool player. He was straight 3-tooling, and his tools totally dismantled the Portland Trailblazers. And again, it goes back to the Portland Trailblazers' inability to stop the opposition's better players. Like Rajon Rondo should have been the most talked about player for the Pelicans, not Drew Holiday. But that tells me more about what Portland didn't do defensively to thwart what the Pelicans were throwing at them in this series.
Well, I think it's very interesting because I feel like they just gave up on trying to guard AD. They're like, forget it. You're going to do what you're going to do, like whatever. So they actually played Aminu a lot on Holiday, especially through the course of the series after Holiday really kind of established himself getting to the rim and even spacing the floor and shooting 3 every now and then as well, too. But it really came down to their inability just to guard anybody at all. The fact that Rondo was able to do what he was able to do in the series, almost averaging a triple-double in the 4 games, while Lillard and McCollum just weren't able to defend anybody. That says a lot about Portland's defense, which, again, was very lauded for moving up in the ranks and finishing 8th in defensive rating from, wherever it was, like 23rd or 24th from a season ago. And you figure that was going to give you hope. And that's what gave me hope in saying, listen, they've established some defensive principles that should have got them through. But New Orleans just dismantled everything they tried to blew up all their actions on their side defensively while getting everything they wanted to get, especially with Rondo picking them apart offensively. And that's concerning. One of the things, though, that I want to even jump back to a little bit for you when you talk about this roster is I think it's easy to say, you know what, let's blow it up when there's dissension and there's some stuff that's just not working for the team, from a chemistry standpoint. And I think, when you look at Washington, that's why the Wall Beal stuff always comes up, because you don't get a sense that they really love each other so much. They tolerate each other and they'll speak well about each other in press conferences, but there's all these reports of them not having that great of a relationship. All intents and purposes, this Portland team is pretty close knit. Dame has been a very good leader, trying to welcome people in, and has done a good job of trying to make this team very cohesive all together. But it's just not working, and that points upward to Neil O'Shea, and he's got to figure out how do we either get better by maturation, or how do we get better by separation, by moving some of these supplemental parts. And guys like Myers Leonard and all those other pieces, like they have no business on this roster.
Let me ask you this question, Shaw, because you bring up an interesting point, and I think it lends to something that maybe somewhere down the line we can have this conversation. Maybe having this kind of comparative study, so to speak, with the mentality of the two guards in the NBA. Why is it so difficult for a guy like CJ McCollum to acclimate himself to Damian Lillard and vice versa? And then you got a guy like Klay Thompson, who by all accounts is the more superior talent, because Klay Thompson does play well on both sides of the court. We put him in the conversations of the Kawhi Leonards and the Paul Georges very easily. And yet CJ McCollum is really one of the more versatile scoring two guards in the game. His defense is a little suspect, but it's not far from the imagination that if he has to, he'll play a little bit of defense on guys. But I often think that part of the reason why some of these guys are talked about the way that they're talked about is how they elevate, other players, how they elevate their teammates. And Klay Thompson has always been that kind of guy where he's never had a problem with taking less shots when Kevin Durant came on board. Never had a problem with stepping up to be the next man to Steph Curry, right? In order to make this impressive run. When people question if Klay Thompson should have upped and left the Golden State Warriors, his first comments was, I want to stay and build a dynasty here. Why is it so difficult for a guy like CJ McCollum, who by all accounts deserves the accolades that he gets, but yet there's still like this inkling that he may not be it, right? Especially if he's playing next to a superstar talent like Damian Lillard.
Well, I mean, you said it, really, that in some ways he's kind of one-dimensional, and when we had the who you got debate between him and Drew Holiday, and I took Holiday because of the multifacets that he was able to bring. McCollum is in that, and I think McCollum can be a better playmaker. Klay impacts the game on his side of the basketball because he's defending. So if he's not scoring, he's at least defending. Whereas CJ and Dame, they need to score. That's the roles of their team, and I get that. But that's where I think the development still needs to come on both of their behalf. How do they impact it if they can't just score? Can they get others involved? Can they make others better truly by getting them in positions and be used as a decoy? Or are they just selling out and just playing hard balls to the wall defense on the other side? And I don't think either one of those guys have gotten there as of yet. I think Dame said in the exit interview, over the weekend, saying more or less that he feels like this team still has a lot to give and they should stay together and then they can be better. And the question really is, does Neil O'Shea does he feel the same? And in this iteration of the Blazers, again, like realistically, this is not a championship team. This is probably not. Well, they proved it. They're not even a second round of the playoff type team. So where are they going to get better, and what does that even look like?
Okay, but even if that were the case, Shaw, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you in this particular way, but you're bringing up something that I just want to kind of get out real quickly. Even if that were the case, you still want to see a level of ascension. Why do I feel like this playoff loss almost sent them reeling backwards, like far backwards than we didn't imagine? Am I overhyping this? Listen, when certain teams suffer a setback, right? Like when the Houston Rockets suffer, a setback, we can foment on it. We could say, oh, this was their window. You know what I'm saying? It's whatever. If like the Los Angeles Clippers get ousted, right? It's almost as if, you know, it's a setback. This is what it is. You know, something's going to eventually change. And if not, this is what we come to expect. But I just almost feel like with the Portland Trailblazers, it's almost disheartening because I guess you want to root for these guys to be better than what they showed themselves to be. And I think the frightening thought is that there's not a lot of room for us to assume that they can get better than what they have right now unless there's some form of a shakeup that does need to happen for this team.
I mean, that's what it boils down to. What does that look like? And what do they think
The
it
last
looks
time
like?
that we had this kind of conversation too, Shaw, I hate to say it, man, but we were talking like the Memphis Grizzlies, and they stayed 1, 2, 3 year too long, and then totally gutted the team to the point now that they are totally a shell of what we even acknowledge the Memphis Grizzlies at. And I would hate that to be the case for the Portland Trailblazers if this is that road that I frighteningly fear that we're trying to tread down here with.
Right. And then with only having a late round first round pick currently slotted to be projected at 24, yeah, you can maybe find something there, but you're going to have to make sure that you get somebody who can kind of come and play right away for them and start developing on the fly while you're trying to be competitive, almost in the way that I think the Celtics have done, in recent years as well too. Like, hey, they were still developing players while still being competitive, and if you're able to do that, then that's great, because I don't think they're in a space where they want to take a full 2-3 steps back and and go into a total rebuild, especially with Dame in his prime. Like, they just don't want to do that, and I don't think they're in a position to do that, from a management standpoint or ownership standpoint. But again, the options seem to be limited for them overall, and you never know what avails itself, come the draft time or even over the summer. But just looking at it with an objective view on paper right now, it seems like their options are extremely limited, and they're going to be handcuffed unless they get extremely creative or some other options just kind of magically avail themselves over the summer.
Portland Trailblazers 49-33 for the regular season, third seed in the Western Conference, but played like an 8 seed, on the verge of just really the bigger question marks you could ever
I feel like
ask.
Denver probably would have played better than they did in
That
this.
that that to me is the most disheartening aspect of this, shot. It's not that they didn't give us entertaining basketball. It's just that it wasn't sustainable, which I find so hard to believe because the Pelicans themselves drew a lot out of the Portland Trailblazers. And in many respects, the Pelicans actually punked the Trailblazers. Which is it's kind of hard for me to imagine because part of the things that we were talking about with the Trailblazers is they got to get a little bit tougher. There's going to be teams that are going to test them physically and mentally. They're not going to allow them to just go in there and, Damian Lillard pointing at his watch, talking about his Dame time, and, CJ McCollum doing his thing. And they were, if one thing that I can certainly say is this was definitely, and I don't want to get away from this because this is about the Portland Trailblazers, but I will say that I saw something different in Alvin Gentry and the way that he coached this Pelicans basketball team and in this first round and how he prepared these guys. I mean, I don't know what he said to Anthony Davis, but he basically said to Anthony Davis, you go out there and you prove to everybody why you are the best player on this basketball court practically in this series, right? In this first round of the NBA playoff series, that nobody on this floor can touch you. Nobody on this floor can stop you. Right. And somehow that must have fed to Drew Holiday. And somehow that just put a big smile on Rondo's face because that's exactly the kind of player that he dealt with when he had the Celtics and he had Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. Right. Like he's oozing over having those type of guys who want to go out there and get it. And if you're Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, and over the last 2-3 years, you awed us with some great playoff performances, you just didn't have enough to play against the best teams in the Western Conference at that time, which was the Golden State Warriors, or at the time, maybe the Houston Rockets or whoever it was, to do what you just did this first round of the series. To me, it totally baffles the mind, bro. Totally baffles the mind.
So I'll close with this, more or less saying that, we all know the old adage, styles make fights, so to speak. And in this case, Portland just got a terrible matchup in New Orleans as well, too. So we don't, while we're kind of lambasting the Blazers here a little bit, we really do have to give credit to New Orleans, as you said, who came up with a great game plan, stuck to it, and delivered, the best basketball of the season, at the right time. Portland matches up against Utah, or maybe they match up against maybe even OKC, and it's a different outcome, Minnesota or wherever. But New Orleans just wasn't the one, for them. It didn't work out to their advantages. But again, there's some deficiencies that they're going to have to figure out internally, and how they're going to best move forward remains a big question for this upcoming offseason.
Definitely, man. This is good stuff, man. Unfortunately, it's about that time for the Portland Trailblazers, man. Time to put that sheet back over them. Their season is done. Close the file for the 2017-2018 NBA season for the Portland Trailblazers. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. This week on The Drop, all about the playoffs, baby. Trying to give you our playoff takes, man. What we saw, what we were loving, what we were not loving, what we were hugging, whether or not players were kissing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, all up in their mandible, all up in the mandible, man. Like some of these cats, man. It's getting a little frisky, man. Listen, Shaw, talk to me about this. Is it just me, or is that playoff atmosphere really in the air? And I'm not just talking about the Sixers and the Heat. I mean, we've seen this with the Raptors and with the Wizards. We've seen this with the Pacers and with the Cavs, right? We've seen this with the Timberwolves and with the Rockets. And listen, man, dudes they ain't about the okie doke right now, right? Like they all up in people's mandibles, saying, yo, you ain't mouthing off at me. You ain't sunning me. You ain't shining me. This is the playoffs. You either come with it or you go home. That's how these guys are playing, man. And it actually is shown, which is really what's impressed me so far in this first round of the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, there's been a physicality to this playoff that, again, maybe we should have expected. But it's nice to see in a lot of.
And I don't know if it's so much as something that we expected, Shaw, because listen, the whistle has been heavy, right? The whistle has been heavy. We were talking about this during the course of the year that we're hoping that the referees do not show this level of inconsistency about the way that they've been calling games at the regular season and how they got a quick whistle to what we've been seeing in the testiness of some of these players. But I really think that players truly and honestly don't care. Maybe they, before they stepped out on the basketball court, they linked up with one of the assistant coaches. They go, how many flagrant fouls am I working with? Oh, I got 6 to work with. All right, I'm gonna probably burn 2 of them, in the first quarter, because I'm telling you right now, I'm not feeling Rajon right about now, right? Like, Zach Collins looked like he was ready to start, going WWE headbutting on Rajon Rondo in game 4. So like players just ain't having it, man. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, that's a problem. I'm saying that is a good thing, because I thought that over the last couple of years, because the whistle was going to be very influential in the way that the playoffs are being handled, that a lot of guys would be very reserved and held back, and coaches would detain guys from actually expressing their playoff onus that they have in them. I like the fact that they're allowing these guys to show a little bit of fire. And even though, it almost looks like it might get out of hand, they have relegated the situation to where we keep it within the conversation of it being playoff basketball.
Yeah, I think it's been entertaining, if nothing else. I don't subscribe to things being as genuine as they were in the 90s and things of that nature, and all that physicality. I mean, I think there's a lot of, I don't know, maybe some fake emotion, but I think in some cases, maybe more so in the case of the Sixers and the Heat, there's some true angst there. Like there's some, they don't like each other. And I think a lot of it from the Miami standpoint is that Philadelphia is so young and so good already. So you gotta have guys like Justice Winslow, and they're trying to, curtail the enthusiasm of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid as well. And of course, the whole Whiteside thing is a very strange aspect and scenario to the entire story. But overall, the physicality has been something that I think has been of note. There's been some great performances, and there's been some mystery disappearances by some players as well too, outside of the Blazers, which we just talked about in general. So let me just kind of like touch on this subject really quick with you and just kind of get your opinion on it. Where do you stand? And obviously we have a lot to get to, but where do you stand on the whole Hassan Whiteside, not really being impactful and not getting a whole lot of minutes in the series for the 76ers?
I think Hassan Whiteside has played himself. I really do. And I'm saying this, people are going to probably hear this and think that I'm disrespecting him. I'm not, but he's playing himself, right? Listen, man, there are head coaches that are out there right now that are already dealing with a lot, right? You look at Greg Popovich, who's been dealing with Kawhi Leonard, and he's been dealing with LaMarcus Aldridge. Can we honestly say, Shaw, that Hassan Whiteside's game is nothing like LaMarcus Aldridge and nothing like Kawhi Leonard's? Like, what has Hassan Whiteside essentially done that would be worthy of being even put in the same conversation of those two guys? Not a whole lot, right? Here you have an opportunity. There's a stage that's been set here. And ultimately through the course of this NBA season, and you're getting into your contract scenario, so to speak. This was a prime opportunity for you to prove to people that you are every worth the penny that you deserve. And whatever, tantrums he's expressing, whatever disappointment and things that he is basically saying, in the locker room and the post-game conferences, if it's not to the benefit of helping the Miami Heat, you're straight up playing yourself.
Well, and a lot of that is I think the way Spoelstra is utilizing him, and then when he's out there, he's pressing to try to make an impression to stay on the floor, and then it's just not translating in a way that's conducive and helpful for his team and his roster. And Philadelphia, to their credit, they're playing mobile. And I saw something out on Twitter the other day, and I can't remember where it came from, so forgive me for quote unquote plagiarizing here a little bit, but a lot of conversation is made about big men in the league and like, oh, you can't play big anymore, and that's false. That's not true.
Right.
Your big men just have to be versatile. You know what I mean? You need Anthony Davis likes. You need Joel Embiid. You need Karl Anthony Towns out there.
And Sean, let me add something to that point about being versatile. Versatility is not about you shooting the basketball. That's a great trait for you to have. But I would challenge you to say that your worth is you preventing other teams from executing offenses, that you don't become a liability for the head coach to have to pull you out of a game.
So, we obviously will jump onto another subject here, but just really quickly, is he either the most disappointed? Are you most disappointed in him in terms of the NBA playoffs? Obviously, outside of the Blazers.
No. He's not the most disappointing. He's actually who more I've come to expect. That I said that the Miami Heat would win this series, and I really believe that part of that was because he would have understood the moment to help elevate himself and be a part of why Dwayne Wade came back to, to be with the Miami Heat and to help them do what it is that he's doing, that maybe he needed that. But it's very clear to me that even with Dwayne Wade being there, he's not doing what it takes to neutralize Joel Embiid or neutralize Ben Simmons or bring some level of fear to the Philadelphia 76ers scoring the basketball. Neither one of these basketball teams, which is supposed to be somewhat decent defensively, have played defense, right? The Miami Heat, the only way they win this series is they have to play defense, and they're not capable of doing it, which doesn't bode well for me to say that they're going to come out of this series.
Okay. So, we'll go back to the negative in a minute here. I want to talk about something positive, get some positivity in this playoff conversation.
I know, I'm so pessimistic, man. Listen, you knew what you signed on for.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Go ahead.
But I think the guy that I've been most impressed with thus far, and just because we didn't know what we're going to get first time in the playoffs, has been Ricky Rubio. And the challenge that he's presented to the OKC Thunder and Russell Westbrook specifically. As we record 3 games, 20 points a game, 8 assists, 8.3 rebounds, 2.3 steals. And again, not blazing it up, only shooting 38%. But he's impactful and he's getting there and he's giving Westbrook all he can handle. Again, we just didn't know what we're going to get. As this is Rubio's first time in the playoffs at 27 years old. But to me, I think I'm most impressed with this performance and the fact that he has the Utah Jazz, of course, with Donovan Mitchell's help, right there, on the cusp potentially taking this series, man. And to me, Rubio's just been amazing. What are your thoughts on Rubio and what he's been able to do thus far in the series?
Rubio. Whatever I used to say, whatever, hate I had on homie prior to this, man, it may just change if he helps this Utah Jazz best the Oklahoma City Thunder. Because I've often said that Ricky Rubio has to play it with a different mode, has to have a different level of aggression to help elevate what the Utah Jazz would have been lacking if they still had Gordon Hayward, if they still had a couple of the other components that they had last year. He has been the consummate pro. But more importantly, he's found a switch. Now, I don't know if it's predicated on him playing against the Oklahoma City Thunder, or I don't know if maybe it's rubbed off because he's played next to a guy like Donovan Mitchell. But this is not the Ricky Rubio that I remember playing in Minnesota. And this, to me, is a good thing if Quinn Snyder has his hands on a moldable Ricky Rubio. Because you can see there are moments where Ricky Rubio is setting himself up to get the ball to other guys. And then there's moments where Ricky Rubio has to basically be the matador. He's got to be the guy to go out there and take charge. And he simply showed that this weekend with that triple-double performance. You know, we often talk about Donovan Mitchell being that dude, but Ricky Rubio's triple-double performance quintessentially is why we're talking about the Utah Jazz having a great opportunity to knock out the Oklahoma City Thunder in this first round, man.
Good point. So I want to also touch on another guy. Not killing it, so to speak, but playing better than I think a lot of people are giving him credit for. And that's your boy, Derrick Rose. Minnesota down in the series.
The bromance has elevated to a fawning, you know what I'm saying? It's just absolutely amazing. I can't even believe it. I'm flabbergasted. There's a new Derrick Rose, and I don't know if this is sustainable, but damn it, I don't think even D'Antoni is prepped or coached for this kind of. he
playing meaningful.
He hasn't game plan for the bromancing like this right now.
Yeah, I think although Minnesota has struggled in the series for the most part, got a big win in Game 3. But Rose averaging 14 a game, averaging even more than Karl Anthony Towns is at this stage of the playoffs.
I was going to say that would have been that is who is more of my bigger disappointment than Hassan Whiteside is Karl Anthony Towns' struggle to establish himself. And I don't want to hear this nonsense. Oh, it's the Houston Rockets defensively taking him out. No, Karl Anthony Towns somehow checked himself out of those first 2 games. He's not been the aggressor. And I don't know if it's because he's caught in the moment because it's the playoffs, but we saw him do a much better job in Game 3. He's going to have to duplicate that times 3 in Game 4 because you're not going to be able to tell me that Jeff Teague, Derrick Rose are what's going to get you over the finish line against this Houston Rockets team. Karl Anthony Towns has to have an impact in that series in some way, somehow, and it needs to happen in Game 4.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he bounced back a little bit in Game 3. He had a nice double-double, and was attacking the glass. So he's got himself up to averaging double digit points at 10. But I think Towns is somebody that you definitely want to see play better overall. Just for the virtue of his talent. A guy that I think I just need to get off maybe my overall expectations of him. And despite the fact that they're actually winning the series as we record again, is Miles Turner for the Indiana Pacers. I think he's been impactful, but he's more like a rotation player. Really at the end of the day, he's not a superstar. He's not the number 2 guy, for the Indiana Pacers like I thought and was figuring he would at least be in these playoffs. That honor has gone to Bogdanovich and maybe even Darren Collison a little bit. Turner, again, he's been good, but hasn't had the impact that I thought he would have had in the series, despite Indiana, winning the series as we record. So for me, I want to see more from him, especially if they're going to be able to pull off an upset and beat the King. Like I feel like they need to get something special out of Miles Turner for them to make that happen for the Indiana Pacers.
One person that I don't think this has gotten enough love, but we said that he was going to be that dude. Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Greek Freak, a much needed game for the Milwaukee Bucks, for them to even out the series over this weekend against the Boston Celtics. And listen, he's come in and he's showed up and shown out. And he's made it very difficult for this young Boston Celtics team to handle the likes of a guy like the Greek Freak very quickly, ascending to the conversation of why we said that he could be one of those top 5 best players in the NBA playoffs right now. That could be the toughest against any team that the Milwaukee Bucks plays against. And he's actually showing that. Now, I will say this much. How about Jaylen Brown, man? Jaylen Brown getting down in the first round of this playoffs. I mean, not because of his defensive abilities, Shaw, because of his offensive abilities. Homie is just straight lighting it up right now. And if not for Jaylen Brown, I don't know whether or not we're talking about the Boston Celtics even being in this series against the Milwaukee Bucks. Albeit that this is what we expected because the Celtics don't have their best pieces out there. But you've got to really feel good that Brad Stevens is allowing his third-year man to come out there and pull the trigger as many times as necessary and basically help put that team on their back on nights when Rozier and Tatum are not getting it done, where Horford isn't having great shooting nights. The Boston Celtics can really lean on a guy like Jaylen Brown, who's quickly becoming one of those two-way players that could be feared in the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that was going to be the case. At least we thought it would be the case coming into the playoffs. Like I said, nothing else for Boston. These young guys get this playoff experience without a savior. Nobody's coming to save them, from the locker room. Kyrie's not coming back. Gordon Hayward's not coming back. It's on them. So the playoff experience that Tatum and Brown, as you mentioned specifically, are getting right now, having to be their own saviors to potentially try to win this series is immense for them. And I'm excited for the way that they've stepped up and handled the challenge. And the fact that Stevens doesn't have a choice. He has to rely on those guys to go out there and produce on a nightly basis again this series. On the flip side, though, with Giannis, I'm going to jump to the other guy, guy we've had on our show as well, too. And it still shocks me that people are surprised he's as good as he is. But Chris Middleton is a certified baller. And people were like, oh, well, what he did in game one of the series, even though Milwaukee lost, like we can't expect him to be, that good, He's just not that good of a player. Now, yeah, he hasn't hit 34 points a game or whatever the case may be, but that guy he's an amazing basketball player. Can score multiple ways. He's taking Boston in the post when he needs to, shooting floaters over them, knocking down the spot up threes when he needs to, and playing good defense on the other side as well. Chris Middleton is a guy who just continues to be underrated, and I don't understand why. It's like people don't understand how good he's become in his role, and people just want to talk about Giannis, but Giannis and the Bucks are not in the series if Middleton is not having the series that he's had thus far.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this elephant in the room real quick, Shaw, because we've been bouncing around with all the topics about our impressions of the first round. Are we really going to be panicked about what happens with this Cleveland Cavaliers team with the Indiana Pacers by the time this weekend completely ends? I don't know how we got to this point. I know that we said that the Indiana Pacers were supposed to be a tough out for the Cleveland Cavaliers, regardless of what, regardless of the fact that, LeBron James does whatever he needs to do. This is a Pacers team that's just not going to let them, get punked by LeBron James. But what do we extract from this situation, given what we have seen so far between the Pacers and the Cavaliers? I mean, I'm not ready yet to start putting the fear that this can go 7 games. But the way that this is being played on both sides, it could very well go 7 games. And even if we said it was going to go 7 games, I would not give the Cavs the utmost confidence they're just going to blow out the Indiana Pacers. But there ain't no on switch for this Cleveland Cavaliers team that I'm seeing anytime soon that's going to put the fear of the Indiana Pacers, where they just start backpedaling from what they've already stepped themselves into. More so anything, I think they've stepped themselves up to where we should really start talking about them being a serious play to knock off the Cavaliers in the first round.
Yeah, I think the Pacers have gone from underdog to favorite. Not just because they're winning the series as we record, but they've just played with more urgency. They've been better, and you can argue that if Oladipo doesn't get 2 quick fouls in game 2, that the Pacers potentially could win that game and be up 3-0. As opposed to only up 2-1 as we record. Cleveland's offense, I think, has been the biggest disappointment of the playoffs in terms of production wise. Only scoring 90 points a game. Again, you got to credit Indiana's defense and what they've been trying to do. But a lot of those guys just aren't producing, and that goes from outside of LeBron, it goes down to Kevin Love, and it goes down to Jordan Clarkson and Jeff Green and Rodney Hood and all those guys who are supposed to come in here and be great for them offensively. LeBron is not able to just get those guys points. J.R. Smith, Kyle Korver, all of them. Like, everyone has struggled in the series, outside of LeBron, and that's unfortunate. So for the Cavs to win this series, it's going to take a Herculean effort from LeBron and somebody else kind of just figure it out and, get 15, 16 points a game, from a source that maybe Indiana wasn't suspecting. But and like I said before, I still feel like the Pacers can play better than they have in this series too. So Cleveland's defense has been better than I would have expected, but their offense has just dissipated.
If there's one matchup that I think there's a lot more room for there to be an elevated level of play, it's the Pacers versus the Cavaliers. Like, I really believe that this isn't like you can look at some games, like you look at the Houston Rockets and the Minnesota Timberwolves, and you can hope that the Minnesota Timberwolves play at an elevated level that really makes us feel like they can push the Houston Rockets to 6 games. But look, they won game 1 and they won it at home. There was a lot of momentum riding. Clearly, the Rockets look very sluggish. They've looked sluggish the last couple of games. I just think it's a matter of just getting themselves right. And again, it goes back to what I say about D'Antoni as a head coach, right? So I feel like when you talk about the Houston Rockets, they're the type of team that can elevate their level of play and they can completely blow the Minnesota Timberwolves out of the water. But there are few teams that you can actually say that in these first round matchups, with the exception of the Cavaliers and the Indiana Pacers. I really believe that we know that the best of the Cleveland Cavaliers seems ultimately LeBron James scoring 45 points, giving you 13 rebounds and giving you like 16 assists to even give themselves a stone throw's chance at beating the Indiana Pacers. And on the other end, the Indiana Pacers seem to be like a mistake here, a mistake not there, a non-foul here, or whatever the case may be. And this team can still wind up being in the driver's seat of winning a series. That must bode well if you are an Indiana Pacers fan, and it has to bode well if you are somebody who's watching this series play out, because you want teams coming in looking even better than the way that they started. And those are one of the few teams that I think about, we in the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, for sure. And Indiana has garnered a lot of respect as a result of just being on a national stage and playing against LeBron James, and beating him, 2 of the first 3 games for sure. So in that regard, you're right. It does give some sense of goodwill and good feeling for the fans per se, but the Pacers team themselves, as Oladipo alluded to, is like, listen, we've been doing this all year. This isn't a surprise to us. We came here expecting to win, and not expecting to get run over. And there should be a little bit more respect, I think, for them, in their role, as a 5 seed. Listen, it's a 4-5 matchup, so that's historically it's just supposed to be close. But you just figure, LeBron, the wily veteran, all Hall of Famer to be, et cetera, going against this young team that is just happy to be here. You thought that was a narrative that was going to play in the Cavaliers' favor, and it still might. But the Pacers have definitely acquitted themselves extremely well. Before we wrap up, man, definitely quick thoughts on the Raptors and Wizards series. I think Spurs and Warriors. We already know what that's where that's going, so no need to really kind of get into that. But Raptors and Wizards, I think that's been interesting to me a little bit, and glad to see the Wizards have started to fight a little bit as they've gotten to the
Yeah, I totally agree with you. What I like about the Toronto Raptors is that they are a basketball team that really believes that they are destined to put themselves in a position to get to the NBA Finals. I think ultimately they do have to clean up a little bit. I don't know if they're one of those teams just yet, Shaw, that I'm saying if they play, to this high degree, because a team like the Washington Wizards will allow you to play at that level. I think that they have to be able to do it consistently. And that to me is the bigger difference. Some teams, they could play on a heightened level of success and do it, and they can streak themselves. It's kind of like kind of like when the Golden State Warriors put themselves in that position to be the Cinderella team, prior to that impressive run over the last 3 years, to be participating in the NBA Finals. That to me is what I'm expecting from the Toronto Raptors. Is they need to play at a high level consistently throughout. And if they do that, there's no question they should be in the NBA Finals. And I think a team like the Washington Wizards is I don't want to use the word test case, but is a good platform to force them to be that kind of way. They're not the worst of those seeds that the Toronto Raptors should be playing, but they're not the best either. And if you are the Toronto Raptors and you want to be taken seriously, you need to be over and done with this Washington Wizards team, especially that you are the better and more talented basketball team on that court, night in, night out, even if they do have John Wall.
You're right. And, I think I still picked it for the series to go extremely long. I did pick the Raptors in 7. But, hopefully they can wrap it up a little bit sooner because, again, I don't have the confidence that this Wizard team is as good as everyone wants them to be. So, for them just to prolong things and maybe take Toronto into a deeper series longer than they need to when Raptors need to go ahead and wrap it up, get some rest, and get ready for what could end up being a very, very more challenging second-round matchup than they thought of, whether that be Indiana or Cleveland that comes out of it.
All right, well, there you have it, man. Good stuff. NBA playoff first-round action is as good as it's getting right now, baby. You definitely want to be checking it out. Keep it locked in, man. More to come from the Baseline Brothers as we continue to dive in and give you our analysis of the NBA playoffs. You're tuned to the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. This was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast, discussing the news of the association. Ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right. Luka Doncic declares that he is going to enter into the NBA draft. Are we excited about this new international phenomenon hitting to our center stage?
They say, Tony Kukoc meets Steve Nash is how they're, kind of dubbing him, the size, the passing, and the ability to shoot the three as well, too. Probably going to be the number 1 pick, or at least top 3 for sure. So this is big exciting news that some people weren't quite sure he's going to come out and declare for this year's draft, but happy to see that he'll be coming over.
All right, my man, Fizdale, Fizzy, he's interviewing for the Charlotte Hornets job. Smart play by Cuppy.
It's interesting. I think, Fizdale is going to be one of those guys who's going to get a lot of interviews before all is said and done. And the Hornets specifically are interviewing Vitor Messina, and then they're also going to interview Udoka. So 2 assistant coaches for the Spurs are interviewing for the same job in Charlotte, while Fizdale is also interviewing. So again, lots of things going on around out there in the coaching circles.
All right. Lamar Odom seems to be eyeing himself a comeback overseas. Oh, while multitasking. Apparently he is focusing on a new marijuana adventure with Richie Soil.
Rich Soil.
You can't make this kind of stuff up, man. I tell you, boy. Big up to LO, baby.
Yeah, Odom said he's feeling a lot better, and he owes a lot of his recovery to the medicinal effects of marijuana. So shout out to him, for trying to get that entrepreneurship off the ground, but does not want to play Big Three. He said he'd rather go to Europe. So, we may see Odom back on the court, but it will not be in the States if it does happen.
All right. Now, unfortunately, we'd like to end off our Coast to Coast on a sadder note, but we definitely want to send our condolences to Greg Popovich, the Spurs organization, and the Popovich family on the loss of Greg Popovich's spouse, Erin Popovich, passing away all too soon. She's had been battling with an illness for quite some time, but it's never good when someone like Erin Popovich, who has been one of the matriarchs in helping establish this foundation, this dynasty. Let it not be misunderstood. It's not always been about Greg Pop at times. We think it is, and R.C. Buford and company. Erin has been the base, the foundation for why Greg does what he does. And unfortunately, her passing came all too soon and really at a shocking time. I don't think anybody was really anticipating it, but we just want to extend our condolences on the loss.
Yeah, the fact that she was doing as poorly as she was, but was still encouraging Pop to go out there when, a lot of times, you would take that time away. And again, it's not a knock on Popovich. He was basically just obeying his wife's wishes. And she wanted him to continue to coach and things of that nature. So, again, our sincere condolences out to the NBA community, Popovich himself, and the Spurs family, as you alluded to, because that's an organization that has a lot of pride and it is seen as one of the best in the world. And a lot of that is because of the people behind the scenes like Erin Popovich, who allow everybody else in that organization to do what they do. So our sincere condolences and prayers up to the entire organization.
Yeah, definitely. And just one other thing, Shaw, I think it's just really admirable that the San Antonio Spurs continue to go out there and they play. They're one of the more inspirational basketball teams right now, just simply because of the circumstances in which they're playing under. They could easily fold playing against, a juggernaut team like the Golden State Warriors. But every time that you see them go out there and play, I think it kind of gives us an overwhelming feeling about why we enjoy the game. And even the players, from Golden State respect that more than anything. This could easily be a complete blowout, but I think they're playing under a lot of not pressure, but they're playing under a lot of inspiration, so to speak, to go out there and give it their all, because I believe that Greg Popovich and Erin Popovich wouldn't have it any other way. This has been an awesome show altogether, my brother. Once again, doing it lovely, doing our thing, as we always like to say, right?
You did it, man. You did it. And again, like I said, I'm happy to be alongside with you, providing the hot takes, my analysis and thoughts on the NBA, man. Again, the league is on fire with playoff action, and we're just gonna keep this thing rolling. So we'll see what we got next week. See who else gets eliminated, who else has an autopsy report that we're gonna have to zip them up in the bag and see what goes on from there, brother.
Body them, gotta body them. For the baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw. We appreciate each and every single one of you. We'll catch up with you next time.